I also went to the Royal College, similar to Kirsty, just a few years before her, of course. And I started off working with mills in Lyon in France, for Jacquard, and then various Yorkshire mills. And eventually, I think it was probably in the sort of mid-80s, I just decided, you know what, I want to be freelance. I felt I had the drive and the determination. I did cry a lot, like Kirsty said, but just kept persistent, started to go to various trade shows, made various contacts, got various freelance work, and that's how I started. So my key work, I have a studio in London with looms. I work as a textile consultant with mills that already exist, whether they're woven mills for apparel fabrics for men's wear, women's wear, whether it's for interior fabrics. These mills may have their own team of designers. Some of them don't. So if I'm in a mill and there's a big team of designers, I can share my experience and hopefully empower them and really make them question what they're doing and encourage them to go forward. Or they're mills that don't have a designer, so I'm kind of called in as a design director for a particular length of time. I work with mills here in the UK and overseas as well. Having worked with mills, there were many occasions I was called on to work with a spinner so we could have specific yarns to develop particular fabrics for the season. That worked really well. So then those spinners said, well, actually, Beryl, you know, could you work on some yarn ranges? So now I actually have quite a large range of spinners I consult with as well on colour and colour ranges, but also, you know, working with the fibre producers, so the texture of and quality of yarn we want, or maybe a yarn that needs to be price engineered. I work in that area as well. Anyway, I've got my presentation, so I'll tell you about the other ways I work in colour. So that's basically what I do. Colour is a huge deal in textiles and in retail. And getting it right every season makes a huge difference to the bottom line. Colour gives individualism, optimism, eclecticism, and diversity. It's a powerful catalyst for stimulating the market, creating desirability, and pushing sales. And a key skill of any textile designer worth their salt is to be a very good colorist. So during this presentation, I want to explore with you some of the ways, as a textile design consultant, I work with colour. All right, we're going the right way. Colour trends offer an imaginary visual experience every season, which we need to explore. Creating new things creates demand. Everyone at any trade show, or you showing your portfolio to someone, the key questions everyone's going to ask is, what's new? Trends every season are connected with art, craft, architecture, science, history, music, nature, etc. And translating trends into textile and fashion detail to make the sort of must-haves each season. I kind of tend to call it, when I'm looking at trends, calling it kind of cultural brailing, you know, looking at all these aspects to see which bit can be new, connecting it with music, with theatre, with fashion designers, etc., going on each season. And also to sort of get a sort of realistic feel of what's relevant, or maybe what was missing last season and what needs to be kind of going on for next season. Colour and different textures go hand in hand. And these little visuals here, you know, do you want your colour you're working with to be shiny and semi-see-through? Do you want to do a transparent kind of yarn? Fabric, which will need a certain yarn and maybe a certain approach with colour? Or these sort of paint splattered daps? Are you looking for a yarn that's like a Donegal or a Fleck idea or an Ickart yarn? That needs consideration as well with colour. Or the other slide there that's sort of tiled, do you want to work with colour, sort of faded mid-tone watercolour? So to achieve that effect, do you want a softly melange yarn or a two-ply yarn to get that slightly smudgy but blurry effect? Colour is seldom truly flat in textiles, and you need to sort of think, I think, about the kind of yarns you do, whether they're in the yarn store or whether when you get them at the yarn store, you can manipulate them into something to make a really extraordinary, interesting textile. Colour is absolutely, truly the ultimate secret weapon to draw people in. People will notice a texture and a look, but people, by God, they really notice colour and excellent use of colour. Our natural world provides us with a wonderful colour inspiration and is used constantly with people every season. And words like natural, eco, organic, sustainable and provenance are today daily vocabulary in fashion and textile magazines. I'm very conscious of all this, and using dye stuffs and textile manufacturing processes that are kind to our planet. But what is really brilliant today, I think, and something that Textiles is embracing, is cleverly combining natural and technology with a futuristic as well as a traditional take on craftsmanship. Gathering and researching colour is also for me about making trend boards and telling stories. Anyone that's seen your work, you know, using sort of props and visuals to sort of convey a message is part of the Beryl Gibson portfolio. Reaching out to as many parts of culture as possible and getting a real feel for what's around you. In my studio, I'm continually gathering bits of colour, you know, wrapping paper, ribbons, tear sheets, pages from magazines, yarn shade cards, postcards, old travel tickets, sweet papers, so you can just get through my studio door. But I collect colour like crazy, and it's important every season, because collecting colour from these various substrates, sweet papers, whatever, will give you an idea of the kind of textural look that maybe the fabric you're aiming at, and will sort of push you to finding the right yarn or the dye stuffs to make it. So keeping these references, I think, are really important. But key with all this as well, I mean, I'm not a minimalist. I don't think any textile designer truly is. But what is important, and I have learnt over the years, and I feel I'm pretty good at it now, is learning to edit. You can gather a whole load of information, you can have a million ideas before you start your new project, but editing it is really key to being a good designer. Working with colour with clients, I use a reference called Pantone, you've probably heard of. It's sort of internationally, it's available in all countries around the world, thousands and thousands of colours. So if I'm working with a client in some far-flung place and I'm talking about a sort of pinky red, they'll know exactly what I mean. That's quite important as well. There's other colour references out there on the market, but Pantone is the most international one. So before I dive into deeper with some colour, I need to admit something, that when I was at the Royal College, I only used white. I'm a sheep farmer's daughter from Wales, and what I did at my final degree at the Royal College is get my dad to share a whole pile of sheep, and at that time I went to Huddersfield College, got the yarn spun, and that was basically all I used at the Royal College of Art. I was very interested in structure and finishing effects. So those two little visuals of sheep, my dad and some neighbouring farmers penned in the prettiest and cleanest looking sheep. I hung my various fabrics over the farm gate and pounded around with my camera till the sheep were right, and took those photos, which actually formed the background of my work. I kind of look at it fondly now as maybe the start of a campaign for wool, and I do work for Woolmark as a consultant and have for many years, and been involved with campaign for wool. So I look fondly back at my years as a farmer's daughter and think, you know what, it was meant to be. I want to look at colour theory with you as well, and you should as students too, if you've not already. It'll hold you in good stead. Sir Isaac Newton in 1665 developed the first colour wheel, and I'm sure as all you know with a colour wheel and the logical theory is There's the colour wheel, there's colour harmonies, and then there's a context of how to use colours, all still very relevant today. Colours kind of drop into three groups. You have primary colours, you have secondary colours, and you have tertiary colours. And then generally, when you're putting colours together, there's two overall moods. One is sort of harmony. If you think about people like Armani and how sort of smooth and how all those colours sort of just blur and just sit beautifully together. And then there's a more discord clashing way of using colours. You could think of maybe somebody like Vivienne Westwood and her sort of provocative way of putting textiles and fashion together. There are two brilliant books on colour theory, and I would really recommend hustling in your library or having a look on Amazon. One is by Joseph Albers. His book is called The Interaction of Colour. These are my Bibles at work. I still use them, even though I work on various trend committees. And it's a masterwork in art education. He demonstrates and explains with colours how to achieve intensity, how through colours to create the illusion of transparency, and how to put colours together to create a sort of vibrating, vanishing boundaries when you combine colours together. The other book, and I have it here, is Joseph Itten, is also brilliant. I marked a page on the train on the way up this morning. They're both not hugely expensive books, but really give you really fantastic kind of theory of how to play various games with colour, to make colours appear and disappear. Johannes Itten, by the way, was a Swiss expressionist painter, designer and teacher. He worked very closely with the Bauhaus. And what was really quite special about him as a teacher, he never wanted to correct his students' work individually, so as not to crush their creative impulse. Instead, he had got his students together and found common mistakes to correct the class as a whole. And here are a few colour theory exercises from these books, sort of tonal colours, how to kind of use colours to bring some to the foreground or the background, and also how colour behaves in relationship to others. Learning and observing these various effects will absolutely hold you in good stead for the future. My in-depth experience, combined with extensive research that I continue to undertake, never underestimate the power of colour, has placed me at the heart of various key colour and trend committees. I have the honour and privilege of representing the British mills at the very influential Premier Vision Colour Committee and the Premier Vision colour card each season. And actually, not last week, I was in China. The week before, was the Premier Vision Spring Summer 17 colour meeting, which you will see the results of that at the PV Paris show in February next year. I have, I'm sure quite a few of you would have gone to PV Paris. This was autumn-winter 16-17 colour card. What is really interesting with Premier Vision, there's never a huge amount of colours, maybe about sort of 23 at the end, very focused and showing new directions of combining and putting colours together, which is actually what mills want. Because there's always going to be a red, a blue, a green, a purple, or whatever on the colour card. But what exact tone of it? Is that purple got red in it, or is that purple got blue in it? And what kind of tonal level is it? And where is it placed on the colour card? What are those messages? And they're really important to sort of fine-tune your antennae to pick up on that. At the Premier Vision colour meeting, what is amazing, so there's me, Miss UK, Textiles, there's Miss Italy, there's Miss Portugal, there's Miss Spain, there's Miss Japan, etc. There's about 15 of us around the colour, around the table. To that meeting, I've already had meetings with designers working full-time with the British mills, as have those other countries. So I will present to everyone what the direction is the British mills think. And the colours I present will be backed up by the kind of fabrics that they will produce next season. And the same with Italy. So obviously I will have fabrics that will represent what we're going to do with tailoring, what we're going to do with jacketing, which are important woven products for us. Whereas other countries, maybe like for Portugal, for instance, are more into shirting. So they'll have a slightly different direction with the kind of colours they want. So after every country has presented, there will be a few common areas. Not too many, but it doesn't quite get fisticuffs. This meeting lasts for 2 days. We find some common areas that everyone has kind of spoken about, and we have various dialogue. And then from the colours everyone has brought to that meeting, we pick and choose to put in a democratic way a Premier Vision colour card together, which will represent all those countries that have come to the meeting. And at the same time, for you that have been to Premier Vision, you've got areas for suiting, for jacketing, for lingerie, for dress fabrics, for shirt fabrics, that there are certain colours in that colour card that will represent those different textile areas for the season. I mean, Premier Vision is an absolute leader in that area. And I feel an absolute privilege to be part of the team and part of that colour card. It's incredibly helpful for the mills that exhibit at Premier Vision, but the Premier Vision colour card as well is truly directional for a lot of retailers, not just in textiles, in car manufacture, in makeup and other areas that need to sniff and pick out and pick up what's going on next season. I chair the British Colour meeting, which is we hold that twice a year, and that's for designers working full-time in industry in Yorkshire, Scotland, and Ireland. It's a wonderful platform for the mills to exchange information. What we do at that meeting as well is the newness the mills want to put into their collection next season. It's ideas that maybe their international agents have given them of new directions. Maybe those mills are doing specials for Prada, for Gucci, for Louis Vuitton, for whoever. So, you know, they've got a sort of feel for what's going on in that area. We bring all that information together and find what's relevant for us as a UK textile industry. You can go online to ukft.org and download what I'm showing you little snippets of our 3 themes that we put together for autumn-winter 16-17. Our first story was Avalon. It was rich, quite deep colours. And the theme here we felt was important was a sort of global, bohemian and a little bit sort of folkloric reference. The overall ambience, we wanted something quite opulent. Our second theme was quite neutral and pared back and bare. We called that Hockney. We always choose names that have a sort of British sort of reference as well. Hockney, as you know, in Scotland. And in this story, we were really championing with woven mills, sort of craftsmanship and artisanal effects. The look here, we were looking for sort of functionality and simplicity and utility. And as you can see, the colours sort of neutral, easy, everyday shades. I've got a few fabrics on the table for you to have a look after from some of the mills and the kind of fabrics that they produce from these sort of themes and areas. And then our third theme for the British mills we called Wordsworth. It's a slightly kind of romantic theme, looking at some poets such as William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. This story had a very kind of tactile, gentle and charming feel, and as you can see, the colours had a sort of pastel and vintage feel. Colour merchandising is something now that I'm involved with quite a few retailers, designers and some high street retailers as well. And what they're looking for is colour direction, but you know, shops have a new drop every season. So, you know, spring, summer, autumn, winter season, they might have 3 different drops for January, February, March, or whatever, till they go on sale in July. So they're looking for somebody to sort of work with them with a kind of fabrics that those colours represent, and also the palette, because it'll be knitwear, blouse fabrics, tweed, etc. It's a very interesting kind of quite powerful way, really, to use colour. So it's a little bit blurry, but they're various months of the year on the left, and the kind of palette one started with at the beginning of, like the first month, and then colours that sort of fall out and other colours that add. So you're left, you're sort of rotating and creating newness every season with colour and fabric. That's a really interesting area to work on. So each season for me in my studio, I do start with the colour wheel. I do love that whole colour theory. I think even though sitting on these trend committees and looking at various things the various top trend bureaus do, you can't beat it. So join it. So I start with a colour wheel, and I place sort of new tones and shades in a logical, warm, cool layout, so I can see what's evolving and also understand realistically the intensity of a colour, the lightness, the brightness of colour, and I think about the sort of colour highs and lows, because a palette shouldn't be all one tone. You do need to mix it up a bit, your bright accents and your subtler shades. So once I've done that kind of research, I can draw on it with the various sort of clients I work for, and find sort of common areas that I think will be important to them and their projects. And I do, as you can see that middle side, I do then match colours to Pantone. And at the same time, I try and play around with colour combinations and harmonies in different proportions, because I'm sure all of you, with your project, you're dyeing colours or whatever, finding your colours in your yarn shade in your storeroom. But putting colours together, you need different proportions of colours to make certain sing and certain colours sort of head to the back. And often it's the colour you use less is actually the most important colour in the fabric range. So I do a whole load of colour exercise to absolutely sort of get a feel for what's happening in the season. And as every experienced textile designer or colourist will tell you with colour, timing is everything. There's no point having a good idea about the right colour and you've brought it out 6 months too late. Your antennae needs to be totally up there so that, it's going to happen at the right time. I have to work between 18 months and 2 years in advance. Some people call me Mystic Meg, or some people call me a witch, but it is so important that you really think through how to do these things well. A textile truly starts with fibres and yarns. They create a look, a handle, and colour, and give a fabric a unique personality. Sourcing yarns and colours is really intrinsic to my work. This is one of my files in my studio. Normally what I do, I've brought some yarn, we call them yarn strings. This is a bit muddled now, but this is a linen yarn. We call it a yarn string, so I've got like the pinks and the greens and whatever together. So when I'm working out combinations, so these are all yarns that the weaving company I work for stock. But putting kind of, figuring out the combinations that you're going to put together every season. And maybe, all of a sudden you realise, damn, I'm missing this tone of whatever that'll work with that this season that's important. I've got a few sort of woolen ones here. I've got endless ones of these in my studio. But that's what we call them in the trade, yarn strings. So they're basically a colourway palette for a particular fabric that I'm working on for a mill. So, yeah. Whether I'm working with wool or linens, silk, man-mades, it's all up for grabs every season. Regarding colour, artists that really inspire me is certainly the local Yorkshire boy, David Hockney. He observes with honesty and integrity, I think, the local scenery, paints dramatic natural landscapes, but treated with a very modern, spirited eye. And then next to her, Bridget Riley, who does the most amazing sort of op art and kind of colour vibrating paintings. Absolutely love her work. And the New Statesman said about Bridget Riley, no painter dead or alive has ever made us more aware of our eyes than Bridget Riley. And then other artists I like. I mean, I'm constantly going to galleries or doing sort of research for my for my work as well, and trying to keep a sort of broader look of the influences. Here we see on your left, Cuffin Williams, Welsh, born in Anglesey. He loved the local landscape, and I'm particularly drawn to the way he quite thickly with his palette paints, almost in a sort of 3D way, powerfully drawing us into his paintings that we almost want to touch them. And then the beloved Ivan Hitchens, widely regarded as the most outstanding English landscape painter of the 20th century, immediately recognizable by his daring yet subtle use of colour and brushstrokes to evoke the spirit of the place. There's some just brilliant artists out there that, you know, we as textile designers can learn from and enjoy. Fashion designers, I'm not a minimalist as well. I have a walk-in wardrobe, but I have had years to sort of collect various stuff. It's certainly Dries van Noten as a fashion designer who I admire. I admire his curiosity, his freedom, the way he uses colour in textiles, its kind of richness, uniqueness, boho, very kind of clever and intellectual as well. He had an exhibition a year and a half ago at the Louvre in Paris as a sort of textile museum. And there's a big fat book out there if any of you looking for something to put on your Christmas present list to mum and dad. For me, he's as influential as sort of Prada and Miu Miu out there on the fashion side. And this slide is quite brilliant of Dries van Noten. That's a painting on the left, like a very smudgy painting, and on the other side, he's used like weft floats in his fabric to sort of recreate how the painting could look in fabrics. Has given him a real original idea of how to use fabric. In the studio, I make inspirational trend boards every season as well to get myself in the mood. Key things to look at for me are things like the past and the future, tradition and modern, and sort of mix up various influences together. I certainly enjoy, you know, what cutting-edge couture can bring us today. And I like the idea of sort of defying tradition and creating something that looks new and honors history, although is bang-spanking up to date. And at the end of it all, I feel good tailoring is at the heart of any good fashion designer. Trends in colour and fashion are often driven by textile manufacturers. These two slides here, one is Gucci, the light blue mohair coat, and the green one is a wool cavalry twill, both woven here in Yorkshire by local mills. I couldn't do a colour presentation without talking about the importance of denim. It is a fabric and a colour story that is not going away now. We used to think of it as a sort of jeans for every day or weekend, but now you can kind of dress up denim as well as dress down denim. It really sort of suits the fickle world of today. It's such an important area that like the wonderful Premier Vision has a show just for denim manufacturers. You know, the fabric can be for blouse, for dress, for jacket, for suit, etc. So that whole gamut of indigo blues and denim blues is a very, very important area. And I love that this centre visual, which was a Gap ad a few years ago. You could go in and buy a pair of jeans, but you could decide if you wanted those jeans aged 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 7 years, just through finishing. Other essentials with colour, as well as colour, is black and white. The importance of basics underpin a colour palette, and it's also a huge fashion favourite. I can count a lot of people with wearing black here in the audience. Again, I've got various black and white fabrics here to see in the front. Another essential in a colour palette always is neutrals, working alone or combination with colours. So neutrals, as with black and white, are true workhorses for a palette. Menswear this season, and it's been growing for a while, is hugely more colour confident, more adventurous and casual to smart looks. Sort of Savile Row London, but a little bit more edgy. Again, with menswear are really blending traditional and performance fabrics. I think menswear are on a really exciting journey at the moment, and Kirsty spoke about it earlier. You know, and looking at that tailoring, becoming quite smart, but at the same time relaxed, and even more especially appealing to a younger market. Interior textiles and accessories, which some of you may be going into, is a wonderful way to inject colour and detail into every day. And actually there's less rules when you're weaving, producing an accessory than there is in apparel fabric. We are in an international global market where colour and textile preferences compete. We are privileged here in the UK with our British textile heritage and authenticity on our side, which is respected, complimented and envied throughout the world. And colour is a huge part of this, as are you, all you students. UK textile education is admired and appreciated globally. Colour is, as I said, a brilliant and powerful tool, and it's a key skill which will help you work in your textile career, whichever path you choose in this fantastic industry of ours. Thank you.